گفتگوی امروز ما با پروفسور یافا شانیک، استاد مطالعات اسلامی و جامعه شناس دانشگاه لوند سوئد هست که در مسائل مختلف زنان در جهان اسلام و زنان شیعه در جهان اسلام و در جوامع غیر مسلمان با او گفتگو کردم. از او 3 کتاب منتشر شده که در این 3 کتاب به جنبه‌های مختلفی از زندگی زنان شیعه چه به عنوان اقلیت چه در کشورهای دارای اکثریت شیعه پرداخته شده. کتاب‌های او سرشار از ناگفته‌هایی هست که تلاش می‌کنه تصویر سنتی و تصویر نادرستی که از زنان شیعه در دنیای امروز ارائه می‌شود رو کنار بزنه و در واقع به یک وضعیت متعادل و منصفانه از زنان شیعه در دنیای امروز دست پیدا کنه، نه تصویری اغراق‌آمیز و نه تصویری کاملا بی‌توجه به واقعیت‌ها. در واقع با یک جنبه آکادمیک و جنبه واقع بینانه که به همراه مطالعات حضوری هست در کشورهای مسلمان و اقلیت‌های شیعه در کشورهای غیر مسلمان عملاً توانسته به جنبه‌های مثبت، روشن و واقع بینانه از زندگی زنان شیعه در دنیای امروز دست پیدا بکنه. پروفسور یافا شانیک, thank you very much for being in this interview and accepting our invitation. You worked and focused on Shia Muslim women in different parts of the world, and your 3 publications and other articles are worked on this specific subject, which is not a unique subject, but is quite rare for academician in the Western world to talk about Shia Muslim in the world, both in Muslim countries as well as Western and non-Muslim countries. Can I ask you to tell us about your background and your education and how did you become interested in this topic?
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you. And yeah, you're totally right. Shia studies are understudied, and more research needs to be done on Shia Islam in general and Shia women in particular. Why I came interested in the subject is because my background is in cultural studies. So I'm interested in how people live and how they get together and build their own communities, particularly within my migrant background or migrant contexts. As myself, I'm a daughter of a migrant who came to, a Palestinian migrant who came to Germany to study, and then he settled in Germany. And questions about identities, about religiosity, about integration, about feeling at home were always part of my own life, and this is why I was interested then academically to investigate this further.
Your education was in Jordan and Germany, if I remember. And how did you manage or found this particular field of study after you settled in Birmingham?
Actually, the trajectory of displacement of Shia are very diverse within the Middle East as well as in Europe. So, for example, a lot of Shia in the Middle East, particularly in the Gulf, are either indigenous or have migrated or have converted. And a lot of these Shia within the Gulf, they had to leave their home countries, and some of them went to countries, neighboring countries such as Jordan, for example, and then moved on to Europe. And while being in Jordan, I was interested in the flow of people coming into Jordan. From where do they come from? Why they have migrated or have resettled in different countries? So the following people and their migration patterns was always part of my own interest. And living in Jordan for 3 years allowed me to have access to a lot of migrants coming, for example, from Iraq, and particularly who have fled Iraq in the 80s and the 90s and have settled in Jordan. And then also being from Germany myself as well, looking at migrant patterns within Europe was also really interesting for me, because I wanted to know how do people move from A to B and why, and how do they build their own communities in the diaspora. And Germany was one of these countries that a lot of Shia have migrated to. Countries like Sweden, Germany, the Netherlands have been sort of the first station for them when they came to Europe, and a lot of them moved on then to come to the UK. So again, my post at Birmingham University again allowed me also to look into the different Shia communities within the UK, who either came directly from the Gulf to the UK or have been what we refer to as part of a trajectory of displacement, a multi-trajectory of displacement sometimes, going from one country to the other, until they have settled in Europe and the UK particularly.
One of the books you edited was Global Dynamics of Shia Marriages. When you talk about the Shia marriages, you have to explain and elaborate what is the difference between marriages in Shia Islam and other parts of Islamic world, as well as the difference between Shia marriages and non-Muslim marriages. Yeah. I mean, how could you manage to show to the Western reader, Western audience, the differences and different angles or hidden parts of Shia marriages?
You're totally right. The first perception of Islam is always that it is, they are all the same. And whether it is within Sunni or within Shia Islam or other groups within Islam, all these groups are so diverse. And within each group we have always subgroups who have their own and unique identity markers. They have their own ritual practices, marital practices, and all this has to be explained. And this is the challenge, if you like, particularly post 9/11 and the increase of Islamophobia, to highlight to the reader and to the audiences and to our students at university as well, that there are different groups within Islam, and they have all their own, so to speak, way of understanding Islam and performing and living it.
In one of the chapters of a book, which was very fascinating, one of the contributors wrote about multi-marriage among youth in the non-Shia environment in Indonesia, which is quite a new phenomenon. Do you like to talk about that briefly?
Yeah, so in a lot of younger Muslim, it doesn't really matter whether Sunni or Shia,
because the perception of Muta or Sigha is normally for or from Shia Islam, but now we are talking about Sunni Muslims.
Yes, so the whole idea of temporary marriage is existent also within Sunni Islam. So we have similar forms within Sunni Islam as well. And whether for Sunnis or Shia, the form of temporary marriage, particularly among young people, is very popular.
But that one of the main accusations against Shia Muslim is temporary marriage.
That's right, and this is where academic scholars are very important in order to change that perception and to allow the reader a more informed perspective. And what I wanted to highlight here is that young Muslims, they like the form of temporary marriage, because while they are at university, for example, they can be with their partners in a halal way, in a permissible way, and so a lot of these relationships, they would turn from a temporary to a permanent marriage once they have graduated, once they have secured a permanent work space.
Can I say they upgrade that?
Yeah, marriage upgrade. married. Yes, yes, definitely. And but that is exactly the point. It's how do young people make their lives halal in the contemporary world.
Sure.
So what do they use from existing structures within Islam in order to live their lives without contradicting tradition and religion and so on. So temporary marriages is a way that to enable people to live together. And until they have the means, and then until they have until they are prepared to go for a permanent marriage, because as you know, I mean, to go for a permanent marriage, you need to have the financial means, you need to have the social capital as well, and for families to accept you as a proposer, and so on and so forth. And when you are a young adult at university, it's still too early for you to build your own family permanently, and this is where temporary marriages actually could be a great help.
So you call it a transitional period?
Yes, it could be a transitional period, exactly. Yes, until they are settled, and then they can also settle their family relationships as well.
Sure. The other book you edited was the book edited with Professor Oliver Charbot, and that was about Shia minority in the contemporary world. Obviously, we talked about this book to the gentleman, Mr. Charbot, but I'd like you to say what was your belief or your motive to have this conference and a collection of articles briefly about this book.
Similar as for all of my my publications, why do I think that we need such scholarship is because there's a lack. There's a lack of knowledge. There's a lack of publications on Shia Islam, and yes, it is growing. And we have seen a lot of great scholars working on Shia Islam. But Oliver and I thought, looking into or publishing something on Shia minorities in the contemporary world would be a great addition to existing scholarship on Shia Islam. So we organized a conference, and the majority of people who presented at the conference at University of Chester were also chosen for that publication. So similar to the Shia marriage publication, which was also based on a conference that we organized at the University of Amsterdam. Both publications are edited volumes that that consist of articles published by people who presented at both conferences.
When we look at the Shia studies, especially in terms of interdisciplinary subjects, it seemed to me that this is a very lonely area, and people hardly people goes to these subjects. But thanks to people like you, you could find different angles from different people from everywhere in the world that Shia studies is not only is not dead, but is quite active and progressive. In all publications I read from you, I can see that you are very optimistic about Shia studies in current and future. Is that right?
Yes, definitely. Because it is such a rich area of study, and because we don't, it's just an emerging, so to speak, area of study as well. And there's a lot that can be done, and a lot more of, as you said, collaborative work that we could do. And I think we are stronger and richer as scholars when we work together. And this is why, having research projects where you have different research members, or also, you know, networking with other scholars working on Shia Islam in different contexts is very, very important. Because again, here, Shia are a diverse group. So you have not only 12 Shia, you have also different groups and subgroups within Shia Islam in different contexts in Europe or the States or the Middle East or even Africa. So, and there's a growing interest in Shia studies, and this is what you can see in a lot of publications, and a lot of publishers are interested in publishing work on Shia Islam.
Yeah, but one of the problems in these kinds of studies, especially Shia studies, is we have two different factions, if you like. One to do with only academics job, removing from the general knowledge and wider audience, and one popular journalistic and very sometimes naive, sometimes not true knowledges about Shia Islam. I mean, politicizing and journalism job about Shia Islam. How can, because in those three books I read from you, you did manage to bring up together the wider audience and specific academic audience together, and that is very important job. Can you tell us what is the secret weapon you had in this field?
So access is really the secret weapon. And so, for example, in my recently published book, The Art of Resistance in Islam, that was published January 2022, without the trust that the different communities, Shia communities in Europe as well as in the Gulf gave me, I wouldn't have done that, I wouldn't have been able to write that book. And this is very important, and I think that a lot of researchers, they face that challenge in getting access to different communities. In that book, for example, I attended religious gatherings, or majalis as we call them, more than 260 public, semi-public as well as private majalis, and I wouldn't have been able to do that work and research these majalis and the communities that are involved in them without the trust that the communities have given me.
The title of the book, the third book we are talking about, is The Art of Resistance in Islam, the Performance of Politics among Shia Women in the Middle East and Beyond. If someone doesn't know your field of study, thinks you are writing about political movements or war studies or struggling or something, which is not the case in your book. Can you, if you want to briefly tell us about the content of this book, what do you say? Because this book obviously it's a unique contribution by yourself.
That's right. This is a monograph that was published by Cambridge University Press in the Middle Eastern Studies series, edited by Professor Charles Tripp. And yes, you're totally right. The title is a bit provocative as well, because first of all, I'm talking about the art of resistance. So, what is art? How do I understand art? That is one focus of the book, but also politics. What do we mean by politics? And here, you know, this is a trap that a lot of researchers fall into. You know, we sometimes take the certain words for granted, and we know what they mean. And in politics, I mean here politics within communities, committees, politics, within different communities, locally, nationally, as well as transnationally, and also, the relationship between state and communities as well. Because as you know, my book focuses on Shia in Europe, in the diaspora, among Shia who live in the diaspora, but also Shia in the Gulf, in the Arab Gulf particularly. And there, obviously, the relationship between the state and communities is very important. So I wanted to understand how politics is translated within majalis, among women particularly. I wanted to know more about the role women play in discussing politics, whether it is gender politics, community politics, or politics in relation to state authoritarianism, for example. How do they translate all these understandings or different understandings of politics within their majalis through morning rituals, through poetry, through performances? How is politics enacted in ritual practices, and the role women play in these? But again, going against the flow, where in the public spaces we always see men performing in Europe or in the Middle East, when it comes to the commemoration of Imam Hussein during Ashura period, or for example during the processions of Arba'in, we always see men in the public space, and sometimes women as well, but the majority are men. And what I was curious to actually research further is, how do women perform these morning rituals in their own spaces? How do they transform the political discourses outside of the majalis into their majalis through
تعزیه زنان ابتدا در دربار قاجار شکل گرفت. نخست قمرالسلطنه دختر فتحعلی شاه بانی آن شد. سپس از سوی عزت‌الدوله خواهر ناصرالدین شاه اجرای تعزیه زنانه در دربار دنبال و توسط انیس‌الدوله به صورت دائمی و منظم برگزار شد. انیس‌الدوله از زنان خارجی که به ایران می آمدند برای دیدن تعزیه زنانه دعوت می کرد، تا جایی که همکنون بخشی از منابع محدود درباره تعزیه زنانه دست‌نوشته همان زنان خارجی است. تعزیه زنانه به تعزیه‌های گفته می‌شود که مجریان و تماشاگران آن زنان بودند. معمولاً در دنباله این مجالس روزخوانی نیز اجرا می‌شد که تنها به صورت تفننی بر جای ماند و عمومیت و توسعه‌ای نیافت. تعزیه زنان به دلیل تنگناهای عرفی جامعه آن روز مورد حمایت قرار نگرفت و به منازل ثروتمندان و شاهزادگان محدود شد و برگزاری آن تا اواسط سلطنت احمد شاه ادامه داشت. تعزیه‌های زنان در تالارها و فضای باز خانه‌های رجال و اعیان، به ویژه خانه‌های زنان دربار قاجار برگزار می‌شد. مونس‌الدوله در خاطرات خود می‌نویسد: اما مهمتر از همه تعزیه زنانه‌ای بود که در اندرون شاهی می‌خواندند و شب عاشورا همان شاهزاده خانم دختر فتحعلی شاه سر و پای برهنه یک کیسه کاه دست می‌گرفت و با صدای رسایی نوحه می‌خواند و زنان اندرون به دنبال این شاهزاده خانم حرکت می‌کردند و دو دستی سینه می‌زدند و اشک می‌ریختند. شبیه خانها در تعزیه زنان اغلب ملاهای روزخوان بودند که راه و رسم بازیگری را آموخته بودند. آنها نقش مردان را نیز در مجالس خود بازی می‌کردند. در محافلی که تعزیه زنانه برگزار می‌شد، اجرای تمام مجالس تعزیه امکان پذیر بود. زنان تعزیه خان حتی بر اسب‌های کوچکی می‌نشستند و صحنه جنگ و جدال را اجرا می‌کردند. با این همه بیشتر مجالسی که در جمع‌های زنانه مورد استقبال قرار می‌گرفت، مجالسی با محوریت زنان بود، مثل مجلس اسما و سلما و مجلس بیبی شهربانو. از مشهورترین زنان تعزیه خان میتوان به مولا مریم خانم و مولا هاجر خانم اشاره کرد. تعزیه های زنان در بوشهر و دامغان و گیلان نیز اجرا می شده است. حضور زنان به عنوان برخی از شخصیت‌های تاریخی در نمایشنامه‌های تعزیه موجب گردید که به تدریج این قشر از اجتماع هم به اجرای مجالس تعزیه در محافل خصوصی و زنانه روی آورند.
Obviously, you're not the first one who researched on women's gathering in Islamic world, but to me, it's you are one of the pioneers, or the pioneer of studying logically and with deep knowledge about women's gathering in Shia Islam. I mean, this is very important point because normally people try to use these gatherings to either humiliate Muslim women or to just use that as a cultural event without going to the deeper roots of Islamic or historic or Shia causes of that. I mean, in these different parts of your book, especially about the women gathering in the southern part of the Persian Gulf, you mentioned about gathering of women both in joyful events and sorrowful sorrows as well. I mean, in Rosé and joy ceremonies as well. And you technically experienced all region by yourself.
Yes.
Yes. Can you tell us about your own experience rather than reading and using other people's sources and doing your own field work?
Yes. I've been accompanying Shia communities since 2009. And it's all started in the Republic of Ireland, and then I moved from Ireland to the UK. And as you know, London is sort of the Shia hub of Europe, so to speak. But then I also wanted to see, to compare how do Shia in the diaspora perform rituals in Europe, and how similar or different is that to the Gulf. And what are the transnational links between Shia communities in Europe and the ones in the Gulf? Who is influencing who? Who is contributing for a new understanding? How are they communicating and networking with one another? That was very important for me to analyze further, because again, going against the flow of presenting Muslim women as suppressed, as passive. No, actually, Shia women that I met are very active and agentic, and they use their majalis or their religious gatherings in order to play a role in their own communities, but also society as a whole, and also transnationally through influencing other Shia communities abroad. So this is one of the main contributions of my book, The Art of Resistance, because it is a resistance that Shia women do. They resist gender stereotypes, they resist women being marginalized, and they resist state authoritarianism as well, through their own means, through their own ways, in poetry, as part of morning rituals, in performances, theatrical performances, but also going out in the public sphere in order to state their views on particular political issues within their own countries. So the women that I worked with and that I accompanied for so many years, they see themselves as very important vehicles within their own communities and societies to change the status quo. And they see themselves, again here, it's not something that they see as something new, because for them, they just are a continuation of how they see Shia women particularly going back to Sayyida Zainab, who they see as a role model that they would like to follow in her footsteps. They have always seen Shia women as powerful and as agent of change, and see themselves now doing or having to do the same job.
اللهم خذ بحقنا وانتقم ممن ظالمنا واحلل غضبك بمن سفك دماءنا وقتل حماتنا. اللهم خذ بحقنا وانتقم ممن ظالمنا. اللهم خذ بحقنا وانتقم ممن ظالمنا واحلل غضبك بمن سفك دماءنا وقتل حماتنا. فوالله ما فريت الا جنك ولا حسست الا رحمك ولتردن على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله بما تحملت من سفك دماء ذريته وانتهكت من حرمته في اطرته ولحمته. وحيث يجمع الله شملهم ويلم شأشهم ويأخذ بحقهم ولا تحسبن الذين قتلوا في سبيل الله أمواتا بل أحياء عند ربهم يرزقون.
Speaking about Sayyidah Zainab, in different parts of this book you focused on Hazrat Fatima Zahra and Sayyidah Zainab to show the importance of resistance and the memory of the resistance and the literature of resistance in women Shia Muslim gatherings. So this follows me to ask these questions. That's why I'm saying your book is rather unique in this field, that normally the feminist writers and the secular writers, not all of them, most of them, categorize the women's gathering, religious gathering of Muslim in Shia world as a reactionary movement, a reactionary ritual. But in your book, we face a different point of view and a totally opposite vision to that view that these gatherings are reactionary. You see that very progressive.
Yes, definitely. And the women that I worked with, they see it as progressive, and they see it as a continuation of Shia resistance. So it's, again, it is not something reactionary, it is not something that is just a development of recent years. For the women in that book, they see their role as a continuation of over 1,500 years of persecution and discrimination. For them, it is just one of these roles that women have always been fulfilling, and they see them, their role as, and their contribution to society and community as an obligation as Shia women to actually, yes, of course, you need to express your pain through your emotions, but at the same time you need to be an agent of change. And this is what they try to do. They try through these gatherings to give hope and power to other women to overcome their sorrow, because a lot of these Shia communities, they fled persecution, they were victims of discrimination, and they have lost a lot of family members. And yes, of course, we need to mourn them, but at the same time, as they see their role to overcome their sorrow and do good for their communities and for their lives, whether in the diaspora or in the countries that they are living in, because they see that the situation that Shia live in today has not changed over the centuries. It's the same persecution and discrimination since the fall of Imam Hussein at Karbala. And for them, this is how they want to teach the new generation as well, and this is why they use they are very active in theatrical performances. They are very active in writing poetry and creating banners and posters in order to teach the new generation that not to give up and to keep trying and fighting against the maltreatment that they are forced to live under, and that they give hope for Shia in general to reach a better life.
When I look at the works by sociologists or anthropologists or women's rights activists 60-50 years ago, most of them look at the women's gathering in Islam, or especially in Shia Islam, as a part of not doing enough attention or not being active in women's rights. But when I read your book, you see that as a line of being in tune with women's rights in this gathering. I mean, this is paradoxical to stereotype use of this gathering to show this is reactionary, but you say it's actually modern or new version of practicing women's rights in Shia Islam.
That is right. So I actually start where other scholars have stopped, like Talal Asad and his work on the role of the public sphere, or Sabah Mahmoud and her fantastic work on women's practices in religious gatherings in Egypt. All of these scholars, or for example, Asif Bayat and his work on everyday resistance, all of these scholars have made fantastic contributions. But what I try to do, and with my book, The Art of Resistance, is to add to the scholarship also the aesthetics of ritual practices and look at it as an agentic practice. Because this has been ignored completely. We have works on how agentic practices can be seen through piety and expressed through fasting and praying and so on. But we have no study whatsoever on the agentic element of religious ritual practices, and this is where my work comes in, because I would like to go again against the flow of this universalist understanding of emancipatory feminist activism. Why do we need to have a universal definition of what we see as empowerment and female activism? Why can't we also give room for alternative forms of feminisms or alternative forms of female empowerment? And this is where the book comes in, where I try to give a space within existing scholarship on female empowerment to Shia women who use alternative forms of emancipation in order to express their agentic role and their power within their own communities through religious ritual practices.
Thank you. Can you tell us, you've been in Iran for a short visit, rather short visit. Can you tell us about your experience in Iran?
I loved Iran a lot. People were again so welcoming and they provided me access to a lot of religious spaces, and so I was there to visit friends and families, and but also to do some research. With as an ethnographer, you cannot stop, right? So even if you are just invited for a cup of tea, your ethnographic brain keeps going, and it was a fantastic experience, and I talked a lot with women, particularly about their marriage practices, about their understanding of mahariya, for example, but also on how they live their lives as Shia, in Iran, whether Iranians or, for example, Iraqis who have found refuge in Iran, particularly in the 80s.
Yes. What was the one of the memorable times in Iran you had?
The metro. The metro in Iran is very specific, I would say, particularly the women's section of the metro. First of all, it was the first time that I see actually a women-only section at a metro, and entering it was as if you enter into a living room of an Iranian family. Everyone was sitting opposite one another, and then other people were standing, and it was a a space for women to gather, to talk, to exchange about information, simple issues. Like, for example, if I can give you an anecdote, for example, there was a woman with her newborn baby, and he was a bit yellow, and so they started talking to her about what she can do in order to relieve the symptoms, or for example talking about, there are some sellers in the metro, and they talking about the different objects for sale, what color to choose, and so on and so forth. And that was a really nice space, because everyone was talking to everyone, and you just had a feeling as if you are a family, so to speak, and there were no barriers. Like, even with my very little Persian knowledge, I was able to communicate with women on the metro, and they were very curious what I do and from where I come from, and they were very welcoming, inviting me over to their place, and it was very harmonic. It's a very pleasant experience.
Can you tell us briefly about your future research, especially since you are moving from Birmingham to Lund?
I have been offered a guest professorship at Lund University, and there I will be expanding my research on Shia in Scandinavian countries. So, as you know, there are a lot of Iranians in Sweden, but also in Denmark and Norway and Finland, and I have links with other scholars who work on Shia Islam there as well. Some of them are in the edited volume on marriage practices, and I would like to develop a new research project looking into Shia Islam in Scandinavia.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Yafa Shanneik, and I really enjoyed talking to you, and we are looking forward for new research on Shia Muslim in Western society and other societies.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.